Tension on deck.
Oof. Wow. Good evening, everybody. There we got a special guest tonight, huh? I got Tony sitting down there, right there. Look at him.
Hello, everybody. Hello.
Let's welcome retired Deputy Inspector Tony Raganella back to the stage. He's been on the show with us a couple of times before. Absolute gentleman. Did his interview for his career. So we got through a few laughs and some good times, right? But now we're back to business. We are back to your subject matter expertise. So you're back on the show. We're going to talk about the SRG, the Strategic Response Group from the NYPD, and Mayor-elect Mamdani's plans to disband it and how that's going to affect New York City moving forward, what's going on in the city, and everything like that. But before we get into that, anything else you want to touch on, Rob? Or?
No, I didn't know you were going to me on that one.
Oh, sorry.
You threw me for a loop. No, I was ready to get right into this nightmare. I think tonight's show will be a riot.
Yeah. Oh,
Good one.
Look at this. We're getting off on a start. Tony's infectious personality is coming to the screen already. Yeah. Just one thing. Just Sal Greco just posted it. The deputy mayor for public safety has, I guess, returned back to the NYPD and put his papers in. And so Deputy Commissioner Kaz Daughtry is officially retiring as of January 9th.
Bye.
So that's official. There's been a lot of questions about what his future was going to be. He hasn't announced what his public service career is going to be. I'm sure we'll hear about that soon. But so that came out and that's official. So just throw that out there. Welcome to everybody in the chat. Good to see everybody. And yeah, let's get right into it. So this is not something new. I mean, Mayor-elect Mamdani, while he was campaigning, was very vocal, was very adamant. I am disbanding SRG. He's not a fan. He posted it in December, when the SRG went to harass and arrest striking Teamsters. As the mayor, I will disband the SRG, which has cost taxpayers millions in lawsuits and settlements and brutalized countless New Yorkers exercising their First Amendment rights. Oh, we're going to get into the First Amendment. We're going to get into what the First Amendment really is as opposed to what we see every day, because what we see every day on TV is not people exercising their First Amendment rights. And Tony is Rob and I discussed this. We talked about it the last 2 weeks on the episodes, but it's just, it's just coming on and on more and more. And, we're familiar, but I'm going to say Tony's an expert in it. Tony actually has a company that you can throw a plug out there when you want, but goes around the country to different law enforcement agencies, talks about disorder control and, whatever the key phrases and topics are politically correct today that you use when you go out there. But basically, you're teaching, public order and public disorder, right? And I see Jose Vega in the comments. So shout out to you, Jose, another disorder control unit member, and works with you, along with you, does lectures along with you. I follow you guys on your LinkedIn, doing a great job out there. But yeah, this is not something new. Let's go back even further. In 2023, New York City Council was trying to legislate the end of the SRG. And back then, members of the Finest Unfiltered, Eric Dim and John McCarry, actually put an article out that the New York City Democrats want to disband the SRG. That was in the Manhattan Press. And, we'll go through the article. March 1st, again, this is 2023. New York City Council Committee on Public Safety convened to implement a plan to make the Big Apple less safe. The goal, disbanding the NYPD's SRG, the Strategic Response Group. And we're going to get into a little bit more after this and show you a video on kind of what they do and talk about it. We're going to get into, especially Tony is very well versed because he was the disorder control unit's commanding officer and put a plan on paper to change the
Did you?
disorder control unit, and it hit some NYPD red tape, and then was reborn under somebody else's name. But we get into that later.
Yeah.
The typical taking credit for somebody else's work. But anyway, it was created in 2015 under former Commissioner Bill Bratton under the SOD, the Special Operations Bureau, which is Rob was the executive officer. The SRG is designed to provide a large, rapid deploying force of police for situations such as civil unrest, large-scale terrorist attacks, special high-profile events. So the article goes on that Tiffany Caban, she testified. This is the Democrats' vision of what the SRG does. It's a rogue, unaccountable squadron. Public advocate Jumaane Williams, another pro-police politician here in New York. It appears their mission is more about suppressing speech and assembly and less about keeping everybody safe. The results of the SRG presence at protest has been aggressive and chaotic and has invariably escalated nonviolent protests into dangerous and violent environments. Has nothing to do with anything being thrown at them, barriers being tossed, anything like that. According to a new report, which was published by the CCRB, it was only able to substantiate 88 of 321 complaints. The reason, because misconduct did not occur. Not that misconduct did not occur. Rather, the officers engaged in purposeful actions to conceal their identity to avoid identification. It goes on and on. They talk about Rice, who was the chairperson at the time, that they looking at, SRG makes up less than, what is that? Hold on. 1%, that's what I thought, of complaints since the group's inception. A total of 472 SRG officers have received complaints. It goes into the CCRB here, the whole 9 yards. But we all know that the CCRB has been weaponized against the NYPD, especially in the 2020 Summer of Love protest season, right? So, during the continuous BLM riots made possible by New York City government, SRG was faced with impossible task, having to do its job in an environment whereby leaders and bureaucrats make it Herculean. John D. McCarry, and retired NYPD lieutenant, virtually attended the city council meeting and testified. I commented on the lack of evidence presented in support of disbanding SRG. Rice herself explained that the uptick in complaints was correlated to the pervasive BLM riots. Furthermore, there was no plan offered as to which, if any, replacement for SRG within the NYPD will be tasked to deal with civic unrest, riots, and terror attacks. So that's one of the things the main things we're going to be talking about today also is who's going to take it over. So what do you guys think about, this has been going on, like I said, in city government since 2023, before anybody knew Mamdani's name. But now, once he becomes mayor, January 1st, it doesn't have to go through the legislation. He can actually just direct Commissioner Tisch, I don't want to see SRG, disband SRG, back to patrol, no meal. Rob?
Well, I mean, we look at the history of it, right? So, and Tony knows this better than I do, right? The task forces in each of the boroughs, right? And they would be combined all into the Strategic Response Group. I think Tony should go into some of the history of how it came about and his plan how to do it. and how it was supposed to operate, because what we see is it didn't operate in that fashion, right? It kind of it took on its own life of its own because of the things that were happening throughout the world and the needs of the department at the time, but they fell short of the real goal of what the task forces and what the SRG was supposed to do, or its primary task was supposed to be. So Tony, maybe you want to get into, how you miraculously put in a UF 49, which is a rewritten report to the upper echelons of the department that vanished when it got up to the next overhead command, and then what happened thereafter.
And just Tony, just before you go, people hear us talk lingo and things like that, and we talk about the 49, and we explain that it's a typed letterhead and it's a report that we send up. This is the first time they're actually going to see one. So I'm going to put up from 2013. So remember, the SRG was established in 2015 under Commissioner Bratton. This was before the BLM riots, before George Floyd, before any of that. So let's see what Deputy Inspector at the time, Tony Raganella, the commanding officer of the Disorder Control Unit, might have foreshadowed. But this is what a 49 looks like for those who don't know.
Tony, were you a deputy inspector at the time or a captain?
No, that was October of 2013. I was still a captain. I made deputy inspector a couple of months after that, in December of 2013. At this time, Commissioner Kelly was still our police commissioner, and I was fortunate enough to be one of his last promotions before he walked out on the Christmas time promotions in 2013. So at the time this was written, I was still a captain.
Well, you didn't get promoted because of this, because he never saw it.
Well, probably not. Right. Right. Exactly. So a couple of housekeeping things first before we get into this. So I think both of you guys are completely nuts and out of your mind for having me back on the show again. But I love it. I love talking with you guys. It's going to be great.
Wait till we call you to fill in for one of us.
Yeah. So I think throughout the next little bit of time that we spend together, I'll probably say some things that'll create some heated debates, which is good. I don't expect you guys to agree with me on everything, but that's what we're here for. We'll talk it out, and regardless of what happens, I'm still going to love you both the same, and we'll get through it. But
Tony, let me interrupt you real quick, because I just wanted to comment on a Hard X Core. He's a big friend to the podcast. He's on every platform that we have. This was at 17:15 hours. He goes, today's guest is in a gamer chair. And he says, poor Rob looks like he's barely holding on in a folding chair. And he's right. If you look at this chair right here, look at this thing. This is all I got. I have to put something on it so my butt stays soft on it. But I just had to throw it out there because it's funny because I had mentioned that prior when we first got on about your chair. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but that was
that was good, Rob, because you before we came on the air live, you said, "Oh, you're in your Star Wars gamer chair." So
Yes.
that's perfect. Yeah, I'm ready to game, fellas. I'm ready to game. I'm ready to go. So Ron, one thing that you had mentioned, which before, and then we'll get into the 49 and the history of it, particularly about the First Amendment, right? So one of the things that I present when I go out and teach the stuff around the country and talk about the education piece, and we always bring up the First Amendment, and I always stump everybody, all the students in the class, because it's a trick question, but I do it on purpose to make them think about it. And I ask everybody in the class, I say, so we're all familiar with what the First Amendment says, right? About the media and religion and grieving against the government and all this. And I said, do you think that the First Amendment affords you the opportunity to assemble in a public place? And everybody says, of course it does. And I said, no, it doesn't. It affords you the opportunity to peacefully assemble in a public place. And that is such a huge distinction. And it goes to exactly what you were saying before, Ron, about how everybody's out there, and they think that they're protesting. When you're in the middle of the street throwing things and blocking traffic and do that, at that point, it's not a peaceful assembly, and it's not constitutionally protected at that point. So that's just some of the nuances of how the pundits and the elected officials and the media, they use these terms interchangeably, and it's not the same. A protest is not the same as a riot, and it's all different terms that actually mean something. Crowd control is not the same as crowd management. They're all different terms that have nuances that mean different things, and it can't be used interchangeably. So that being said, back to the 49. So uh, I was very fortunate as the CO of the disorder control unit to have a wonderful, amazing staff that worked with me. Very intelligent guys and gals that worked with me, and collectively we really saw a lot of the handwriting on the wall of what was to come, especially after what happened with Occupy Wall Street and everything else. But in 2013, we kind of saw the foreshadowing of what was going on around the world in Europe, South America, the Arab Spring that happened over in the Middle East, and all these different things that came together. And we kind of recognize, especially the riots that happen in England, because normally we see a lot of what happens in Europe ends up finding its way over here to the United States. Case in point, the advent of what we saw with incendiary devices and Molotov cocktails being used during 2020. England saw that long before we did, but we kind of knew that that was eventually going to find its way here, and why we kind of advocated to get specialized personal protective equipment for SRG and what was before that with the patrol borough task forces. So in 2013, when I wrote that 49, or that report that was supposed to go up the chain through up to the chief of department, we kind of we laid out, and I kind of referenced what the issues going back 15 years, what the issues were with the patrol borough task forces. And just to highlight some of those issues, each at that time, it was the task forces were kind of the preliminary or the primary units that would go to protests and civil unrest. Any mobilizations where you needed a lot of cops quickly, whether it was a building collapse, a missing child, things that would kind of strain a precinct or 911. We kind of were able to mobilize officers quickly to respond to a multitude of different events or incidents around the city. And there were 8 different patrol borough task forces, one in each of the patrol boroughs around the city. The problem was when it was created, and that whole thing came as a result of Chief Anamone working with Chief at the time, Tommy Graham, working with the Disorder Control Project after the Crown Heights riots in the early 90s. And they realized and recognized that we need some type of units that can actually go out there and respond to this stuff. And that's how the patrol borough task forces were born. The problem was that with the patrol borough task forces prior to becoming SRG, and why we saw and recognized that there was an issue with it, each one of these patrol borough task forces fell organizationally under the patrol borough commander. So each chief in each borough had control over their task force. Then you had the disorder control unit, which at the time was commanded by Chief Tommy Graham. The disorder control unit was responsible for now training in riot control and responding to protests, responsible for training each one of these patrol borough task forces. Yet they reported to 8 different bosses operationally. And what ended up happening over the course of years was that you had something called mission creep, where each one of these patrol borough task forces were being utilized by the commander of the borough to say, hey, you know what, there's nothing really going on today. I need you guys to move the sky watches around the city, or we're kind of low in doing transit bag checks for counterterrorism. I need you guys to go down into the subway and do this. Peddler enforcement. We have a problem in the borough with peddler enforcement. I want the task forces to work on that. And so what ended up happening over the course of years was that
DWIs too, right?
yes, yep, absolutely.
Wow.
And so despite the fact that the disorder control unit was trying to get all the patrol borough task forces on the same page with training and tactics, they were being pulled in a million different directions operationally. And so when we wrote this 49, we recognized and said, and what the way that this came about was the chief of department at the time recognized, it was Chief Banks. He recognized that there was an issue with the patrol borough task forces, and that so he sent out a 49 to each one of the patrol borough commanders, asking them for their input and guidance on what could be done differently with the patrol borough task forces in order to streamline them or make them better to get away from the mission creep. Because this came up actually in a PMI, Columbia University's Police Management Institute. It actually came up in one of the groups. I think it was Group 22, if I'm not mistaken.
You went
Kind
to
of look
PMI,
at this
Tony?
problem. What was that?
You went to PMI?
I actually did, but it was with you, Ron, and we're not going to show any pictures this time around because this podcast is not about me particularly. So hold those pictures. So yes, so this actually came up numerous times where we recognized that there were problems organizationally and operationally with what was going on with the task forces. So the issue was when the chief of department put this 49 or this report out asking for input on what could be done better with the task forces, somehow they neglected to ask the disorder control unit what their thoughts were on it. And somehow I was able to get to Chief Banks and tell him, not for nothing, but we're the training arm of the patrol borough task forces. Somehow we were left out of this loop, and I think that our input is kind of valuable and needs to be represented before you make any decisions about what you're going to do with the task forces. And he agreed 100%. He said, yes, absolutely. And we ended up getting a phone call from the chief of department's office and said, we want you to participate in this communication, write a report on what your thoughts are. And this is kind of where Rob knows the rest of the story. We wrote a very comprehensive 49 about what our thoughts were on the patrol borough task forces. And we believed that the patrol borough task forces needed to be centralized instead of decentralized. They needed to fall under one boss that could oversee the 8 patrol borough task forces so that they would have control over them and eliminate any mission creep and keep them on par with their primary mission of responding to protests and dealing with any civil unrest and public order issues was the primary. Yeah. Secondary to that would be mobilizing for any emergency incidents around the city, whether it's a crane collapse, a building collapse, a missing child, wherever you need a lot of cops quick. And then third primary responsibility would be when nothing's going on, they could backfill or help out precincts that are having a spike in crime to drive around, because the patrol borough task forces were not in the 911 rundown. So they could be put into any one of the precincts around the city to help as a mobile deterrent to go out and enforce any issues that were going on with street robberies or anything else. All right, so that was kind of what we laid out. Yeah. In that.
Let me cut you off for a sec. Yeah. So for those who don't know, like 49, the report that Tony's talking about, that gives his synopsis of the breakdown of his analysis of the task forces and what his vision of what the task forces would be moving forward. So the way a 49 works out is basically your first paragraph is, you want to catch somebody's eye. It's like anything else, right? It's like the beginning of a podcast or anything else. You want to catch somebody's attention in the beginning, right? So it's like it's an overview. Then you go through the body and you give all your meat and potatoes, and then you give a summary at the end. A lot of times the bosses will read paragraph 1 and the final, and the closing paragraph, and that's it. So I just want to you want to read it or you want me to? I'll read it. Whatever.
Go ahead.
Thanks. But this is remember, this is listening to this, people. This is from 2013,
Right.
right? This is not after 2020. This is in 2013.
This is before Ferguson, before
Any of it.
Baltimore, before any of that.
Right. So in regard, this is Tony's the author of this, right? In regards to the above referenced communication requesting follow-up on Patrol Borough Task Force analysis, the undersigned has identified and assessed a number of issues affecting the capabilities and performance of the Patrol Borough Task Force, as well as potential solutions. Many of these issues have been observed over the past 15 years in a variety of reports issued by the Office of Management Analysis and Planning, the Pencil Pushers and OMAP, Police Management Institute Group 22, and the Disorder Control Unit itself. Many of these issues have not been effectively addressed, thereby allowing them to remain and, in many cases, worsen. Typical bureaucracy, right? Given the nature of recent outbreaks of civil disorder in Europe, the Middle East, and South America, the DCU, Disorder Control Unit, believes that there exists the possibility of civil disorder in the United States. Crystal ball. Whose strength and speed could overwhelm some of law enforcement's capabilities. Any additional shock to the country's current political or economic situation could unleash unrest and violence on a scale unseen in recent decades. Due to its historic relationship and the training oversight that it possesses, the DCU is in a unique position and has a distinctive perspective with which to comment and make recommendations on an analysis of the Patrol Borough Task Forces. Therefore, the undersigned recommends the following steps be taken, and then you got into all your choices. Now, listen, I was a commanding officer of the Queens North Task Force.
Yes.
So I took over after Bobby Bonifati, who was there for quite a long time. He's a legend in the job, a legend in task force. And I think Rob brought up, the DWIs were a big thing, right? So task force was basically, like you said, they were independent. So they were out there, they were getting numbers, right? They were getting certain specific numbers, and DWIs was one of their big things. They all had DWI units. And one of the big things about the Queens North Task Force, which I commanded, was they always went to traffic stat, and the big running thing was they always had more DWI collars than the highway unit. And then when I was asked to go there, to convert it into more of an assisting unit, something like you're talking about, where let's get more training again into disorder control, but let's also go and use them to assist in crime control strategies in the precincts. So for high visibility and whatnot like that. So that was on a very small localized level, because like you said, I answered to my borough commander. I didn't answer to disorder control. I didn't answer even when Graham was there. We didn't answer to Chief Graham.
Right.
We answered to our patrol borough commander, so we were independent. So what you're saying is you wanted to bring everything together and make it one.
And part of, I'm glad that you said that, Ron, because part of the other issue was, as the disorder control unit, we were tasked with doing the training for all the task forces, but organizationally, we fell under special operations, whereas the task forces fell organizationally under patrol, under patrol services through the boroughs. So I had no direct connection with them organizationally to be able to mandate that they come for training or that they do this. It was always trying to navigate or sometimes circumvent organizational issues to be able to get the training done. So we realized that this had to be centralized, and it had to, the task force had to fall under one centralized boss or organization. And that's what we laid out in that 49. And then when I presented it up the chain to my boss at Special Operations Division, it was kind of, how can I say, Rob?
Stolen?
It
No.
was tabled. It was tabled. It was put in the round hopper, and it was put to the side. I mean, as far as the training, I remember that when they were task forces, Whedon would have to. I think he was a 2-star at the time. Would have to confer with the borough commanders and say, hey, can I take your task forces and do the training and stuff? Or can we do training in your borough? And I remember you used to do the red letter exercises, and there was information that had to be put out so everybody was prepared for it. So yeah, it wasn't systematically set up for the proper chain of command for what needed to be done. And your 49 definitely spelled it out, but it didn't make it past the first hurdle. So
it didn't make it past the first hurdle, and I'll just inject my opinion on this. I just think that my boss at the time, that who I reported to at the time that all of this was going on at Special Operations, was Harry Whedon, who was the chief, and Rob was the executive officer, and I kind of coordinated with Rob on a lot of things before it reached Whedon. And when I collaborated or brought this up to Rob, he thought it was a great idea. We thought it was a great idea. But then when I sat down with Whedon to go over it, he just looked at me like it's my belief that he saw this as nothing but a power grab, and that I was just trying to take over all the task forces. And I said to him directly, I said, boss, it doesn't have to be me that takes over the task forces. That's not even what this is about. Somebody has to do it. It doesn't necessarily have to be me, but it has to be centralized, because we keep getting involved in this mission creep and all these deficiencies that happen, and it's not effective or efficient with what's going on. And he said, nope, not happening. And 49 ended up not really going anywhere, and it didn't. It got distilled into something that it really wasn't supposed to be, and it wasn't exactly what I wanted it to say. And then shortly thereafter, Commissioner Kelly leaves, and Bratton comes in with the whole re-engineering.
were you asked to be on the re-engineering team at all? Because I know Hughes got tapped for that, right? Specifically,
Yep.
I was part of the training.
He got tapped for it, and he came up with a great idea.
Who?
Yeah, well. So what ends up happening through re-engineering?
Always a
when
better
Bratton
idea when
comes
somebody
back,
else's.
When Bratton comes back the second time, and he puts out all the re-engineering, somehow, and I'm not. I'll plead the Fifth Amendment, but somehow that original 49 that we wrote somehow made its way up to the re-engineering committee into Bratton's office directly. And from what I understand, he took a look at it, thought it was a great idea, and then gave it to the re-engineering committee and tasked Steve Hughes to run with it and implement the whole idea. And as a result of that, then all of a sudden, because it was coming from the other end down, all of a sudden.
So Steve didn't take it off the shelf and walk out the door with it. It was handed to him when he walked out the door with it.
That is correct. And
well, we don't know who handed it to him.
Yeah. So miraculously, all of a sudden, Chief Whedon thought that this was a great idea. And
because now it's coming from Bratton's office.
Right, exactly. And so it was a great idea, and now we're going to do whatever we can to help and facilitate. So I was working closely with Steve Hughes on, he was on the re-engineering committee, but he needed our expertise at the disorder control unit to get this all done. We already had the blueprint done for it. So it was basically just massage it a little bit to what they wanted and make it work. But what ended up happening was we initially, when I envisioned this whole idea of creating this, it was going to be an 11-week academy that the task force into SRG had to go through, right? And it's for obvious reasons that if I explain it, you'll understand. And actually, Rob, you could jump in here. Like if we ask why the emergency service unit in the NYPD is such a premier elite unit, Rob, why would you say that ESU is elite?
Well, right now they're up to 9 months of training. That's more training than they get in the police academy. So exactly. You have to think they're experts in everything, and a lot of the things that they're taught are from outside agencies like ROCO, the scuba PADI certification, EMT New York State certification. These are all things that are not done within are certified by the department. So it's just not, hey, sign the book and you're in. You literally have to study and pass these things. So just like you said, they make a difference. And based on your training and the stuff that you see, throughout the world, that training would have been tailored to that too.
Please. So what we, along those lines, we wanted to take and make, to be able to give it credibility and specialization, we wanted the task forces, with when they were going to be centralized, to go through an 11-week academy and get all this specialized training related to responding to civil unrest and dealing with protests and all of that. And we had that all laid out. What ends up happening is we laid this all out to Steve Hughes, and he went back to re-engineering with it. And basically it came back that there's no way that we could do 11 weeks. It's not, we don't have the capacity to do 11 weeks. We're not doing that. You have to whittle it down to 4 or 5 weeks. So we took our 11 weeks, we whittled it down to 4 or 5 weeks, and then we resubmitted that. We cut out half the stuff that we had in there that we thought was important. And then those 4 or 5 weeks came back to us and they said, you can't do 4 or 5 weeks. We need to get this done in 2 weeks. And I said, how is anybody going to be specialized or have any credibility to do the functions that we're asking them to do in 2 weeks? Oh, and by the way, one of those weeks is going to be nothing but heavy weapons training on the M4 rifle. So wait a minute, we're asking this now elite unit, right? That's not going to be so elite, but we're asking this elite unit to now, their primary mission is supposed to be crowd control, crowd management, public order, civil unrest. But one of the 2 weeks that they're going to be training is going to be based on heavy weapons. And then that whole crossover happened where through re-engineering, we had the Critical Response Command, CRC, had heavy weapons. SRG became heavy weapons trained. And then you had emergency service unit, right? And this was all as a result. I completely understand why. I didn't agree with it, but there was a heavy emphasis because of what happened with the Mumbai incident and the terrorist attacks. Everybody was so hyper vigilantly focused on active shooter, that we completely threw the baby out with the bathwater and said, don't worry about disorder control stuff. Don't worry about protests. We got to focus on protecting our city for active shooter events. And because of that, SRG, and I will tell you, through, despite what anybody else is going to say, I have 50-page of documents to prove that myself and my staff were the designers of the blueprint for what SRG was supposed to be. We named the unit Strategic Response Group. We designed the patch. We just had the whole layout for the 11 weeks of what it was supposed to be. And unfortunately, it turned into something and morphed into just kind of like kicking the can down the road, changing the name, centralizing it, and moving on with it. And it became a unit that was heavily involved in an adjunct for emergency service, responding to active shooter stuff, and the disorder control element, which was supposed to be the primary mission. It kind of fell by the wayside. And as a result of that, we see some of the mistakes that have been made, and they ended up not being the specialized, credible unit that I had wanted them to be.
All right. Two things. One, I want to just address 92 Charlie. His comment, Steve Hughes was a great boss. Nobody here is bashing Steve Hughes. I know Steve for many years. You guys know him much better than I do, worked with him closely. Nobody's saying that. We're kind of jokingly saying, Steve stole the idea, but like Tony just laid it out. Tony put this plan together with his staff. Tony presented it. It hit a brick wall. It got knocked down. It didn't get pushed forward. Then when the re-engineering came up under Commissioner Bratton, somehow the 49 made its way through backdoor channels into Bratton's hands. Bratton appreciated it. Steve Hughes was already in re-engineering. That report was handed to Steve. Steve didn't come up and say, oh, I've seen this before, so now I'm going to just erase Tony's name and put my name on it.
Correct.
We're kind of being a little facetious. We're joking about it. I'm going to apologize if it came across that I was knocking Steve Hughes, because I was not knocking Steve Hughes.
No.
Well, Tony himself said that he worked with Steve.
Yeah.
So there was no animosity there.
No.
But see, the problem with the police department is that many of us don't recognize the talent and don't give credit where credit's due. And I think that, and maybe Steve didn't know that. Steve might not have known that Tony already had that original plan, and that's where it came from. But others did, and there was no recognition. And that to me that's where there's problematic within the department. So, but nobody's blaming Steve Hughes. I'm not.
Yeah, no. So, and I'm joking. It's probably me because I keep, just trying to needle Tony a little bit. That's what it is. It's not, all right, good. I mean, he wasn't taking it that way. So maybe I didn't come across that way, but I just want to know. And if Steve's out there watching, listen, wish him all the best, and always enjoyed my interactions with him. And like I said, you guys worked a lot closer with him than I did. So
I worked very close with him because he became the commanding officer of the Strategic Response Group, right? So he literally, he wrote his own ticket, that's fine. I know other people that wrote their own ticket, but he actually got I think one promotion out of that, and then I think he became a borough commander. So, but that's the story. So yeah, I'm not saying he's a bad guy. I worked with him a long time. He was very close with Jimmy O'Neill as well. So I mean, but whatever.
We're gonna get into he also wrote an op-ed in the Post, and we're gonna get into that in a little bit. But let's put a quick video out. This came out in 2000, I believe, 18, and it was a Channel 7 News special report, exclusive, and it kind of runs through what the SRG had evolved into in its first couple of years. You heard from Tony what the plan was, what the objective of SRG was, but we're going to get into that. And we're doing a lot of this. There's a lot of prelude into Mamdani disbanding it, and then we're going to get it. Believe me, we're going to get into what we see and what we all feel the future of the NYPD may look like without an SRG, or what SRG should morph into from this point, if it's going to be rebranded. And I know that we all do not see it the same way. So, we're going to get into that discussion.
And I'd like to comment after this video too. I just want to say a few things about SRG afterwards.
You want to say it before or after?
No, I mean, I can preface the video. Listen, what they morphed into may have not been their core competency and the thought that they were, but they were and they still are a very important unit, because they're a force multiplier for multiple things. When you call a level 1 mobilization for something, they're responding all the way up to level 4. When there's like Tony said earlier, building collapse, a train, issue. And more importantly, they're a force multiplier for ESU. You have to remember that there's not that many ESU working at any given time, right? There's only a certain amount. I'm not going to give the number out, but there's only a certain amount of members of ESU. And then they respond together as a team. When you have the Strategic Response Group respond, there's a lot more, and they're a force multiplier. So that outside perimeter is taken by them, and that alleviates patrol, and it makes sure that we ourselves have trained with them, and they know what ESU is going to do, and we know what they're going to do. So I mean, what they're initially was supposed to be, the disorder control type of response team. No, they got away from that. Maybe there should be two. Maybe there should be an SRG and a disorder control units. But I mean, if you want to show the video, show the video. But I think they became an important asset, but it became an important asset to emergency service unit. Maybe not necessarily.
He's lining up his argument against us, Tony. He's lining it up.
I'm lining it up, bro.
He's getting the first hit in. He's getting the first hit in.
I'm fishing.
You're not fishing. You're getting the first hit in. That's fine. Listen, we'll talk, because I agree with you on certain points, and I disagree with you on certain points. But actually, I think your last statement is in line with what I think both Tony and I are going to say. But let's take a look at this 2018 thing. It kind of shows you, the diversity of what SRG, what their duties and responsibilities, how diverse their duties and responsibilities were. And this doesn't even really, they mention it and put a little excerpt in, but, disorder control is just, so let's take a look.
An Eyewitness News exclusive. They answer the most dangerous calls in New York City and flood areas or events that have the potential to spiral out of control.
Now, for the first time, we're getting an inside look at the NYPD Strategic Response Group and how they keep the city safe. Eyewitness News reporter NJ Burkett rides along with the team. He has an exclusive story.
In the safest big city in America, a man is being shot.
Shots fired, 218 West 140.
And Sergeant Dan Conforti and his partner Jason Torres are on the move.
Units responded to shots fired.
Careening through the streets of Upper Manhattan in a race against time. They make it to 140th Street in less than 3 minutes as units converge on the crime scene from every direction. The victim carried from his apartment building, bleeding and barely conscious, with a bullet wound in his abdomen.
Yeah, roll with him, I'm coming.
Other officers take up positions around the scene, determined to keep the gunman from getting away.
He just shot someone, so he's armed, he's dangerous, and officers are convinced he didn't get far. So they're going to have to search every building on the street. It's one of the riskiest things a police officer has to do.
People on the scene are telling us the perpetrator fled.
He could be anywhere, couldn't he?
Yes, he could.
Sergeant Conforti and Officer Torres are members of the NYPD Strategic Response Group, an elite unit of highly trained, heavily armed officers assigned to potential trouble spots, whether it's patrolling for gang members in Harlem or deterring terrorists in Times Square.
The mobility, the rapid response, that's what SRG is about.
That's what it's about. Being in one part of the city, focusing on one issue, and being able to turn on a dime and go to another part of the city to handle another issue seamlessly.
The SRG responds to active shooters and mass demonstrations, the largest unit of its kind in the nation.
Move back, move back, move back.
It's the NYPD's rapid deployment force, and Eyewitness News was granted extraordinary access.
You ready to do this?
The first inside look at the unit since it was formed 3 years ago and mobilized when commanders need to flood the zone.
Anywhere in the city, we're a citywide unit. From Staten Island to the Bronx, we have a command in each borough in the city. Each one is fully equipped and tasked and ready to go.
After a spike in shootings, SRG officers were called in to assist precincts in Upper Manhattan. After a report of shots fired in this building, Sergeant Conforti and Officer Torres searched the stairwells for a gunman.
We check the roof, every floor. We go systematically down all the way to the bottom floor, make sure we don't find any casings, any spent ammunition, anything like that.
Back on 140th Street, it will be up to the detectives to track down the gunman there, as the officers get ready for the next call.
It's very dangerous work. Very dangerous work. We get to work throughout the 5 boroughs. You know, you go everywhere. We kind of get a piece of everything. You know, our main missions, we get to cover a lot of ground. It's a new unit. I think we're breaking new ground, and I think it's very necessary in the time that we live in.
I see Mike Cody there, huh? Good old Mike Cody.
I saw a lot of different familiar faces, you know. Dave was there, you know, a bunch of other guys. Yeah, I was laughing when I watched that video too. Yeah, I think Mike Cody always had to have the last text. But yeah, so that's basically what SRG had, you know, had gone into, and you see them responding to different things throughout the whole city. So from a disorder control unit and the task forces being used for disorder control mobilizations, going out looking for missings and responding to bank robberies, which I did away with because that was the most wasted mobilization that there was. They used to love when I used to go over the areas. The task force commander and canceled level 1 for that because it's useless. But the you know, to going out and being this very specialized unit, or supposed to be very specialized, like you got into with the different trainings. You know, they had the heavy weapons. They did work with ESU, and so, you know. But what we're talking about mainly here is disbanding this unit and how it's going to affect the disorder control portion of it. So, you know, what do we have, you know, that let's fast forward to today, right? So now we've talked about the history. We've talked about the genesis of SRG. We've talked about what SRG was envisioned to be, what SRG was created, and how it transformed. And throughout the years, because now you're talking about, you know, they're 10 years into SRG, right? We're all off the job now, but you see now, you know, SRG is still being used for different aspects, right? SRG, first ones through the door, and I think it was SRG and CRC were the first ones through the door on Park Avenue for the mass, you know, for the, you know, the active shooter. And because they had the heavy weapons and because they had the specialized training, they were effective. They were effective. And like Rob said, when we did the show, you know, they were able to assist ESU so that the ESU assets could clear that building much faster because they were able to secure behind the ESU after ESU cleared an area, which is their duties. Correct, Rob? So
they're right. After ESU clears an area, they're to maintain it so nobody comes up behind ESU's back. Absolutely.
Which frees up ESU members from having to do that,
right?
Which allows them to get further and deeper into the building.
You able to advance the team,
yeah. Right? So
I just want to interject because we know about the protester agreement, right? So we talked about that, and I think that morphs into after the George Floyd riots, and everybody was concerned. I was there, so I know. You know, who was in charge of SRG1? It was Julio. I forget it. But he did a great job with lines and everything else. And they did a good job. They acted as a disorder control unit and a protester. And then when they got too many complaints, people complained. And then the agreement came out. And then they started putting community affairs on the front line. That was the downfall of the department trying to eliminate SRG when they had no right to do that. I personally feel that SRG was capable of multitasking, doing all those different tasks with their primary mission should have been disorder control or policing riots, policing disorder. And you know, now it's fallen apart completely. Now was it the commander has to call for them to come in, and now they're coming in as a second response and not the primary. I think it completely fell apart. So I believe that they were capable of doing all of those. I watched it, but I know you guys are going to disagree with me. But there were times where, you know, they could multitask and do different things and not always have to be on the front line. But right now, I think the way that they've been portrayed, the amount of, you know why they got a lot of CCRBs? Because they were on the front lines, right. And they were pushing people out. I watched them set dumpsters on fire. I watched them throw rocks and everything else, bricks. They used to stage in the Bronx. We found staged bricks, like they would deliver like a pallet of bricks where they would be ready to grab them and then throw at the police. So all of those things, you know, they did. But then after that, I think the downfall is that the current administration was Adams, where they stopped doing that under, or if it might have fallen under de Blasio's last couple of years. And then it started this cascading event of let's get rid of SRG. They're the problem. Well, they're not I don't think they are the problem. They're creating a greater problem by not doing this because, and I think Tony and Ron, we can get into it. When they're gone, who does this work? Who does this? Because I don't put my trust in any community affairs officer wearing a light blue jacket. I see them making arrests. We saw them at the Tesla dealer down in Manhattan making arrests. I mean, I don't think they're supposed to be doing that. They were supposed to be coordinating. So I just think things had happened and the ball's already set in motion. And now Mamdani sees, an opportunity to, when he's running for election, I'm going to get rid of them because the people that voted for him are the ones that said, oh, we don't want them anymore. And so Mamdani's like, all right, I'll get rid of them. And you vote for me and we'll get rid of them. So now they're going to get rid of a unit. And I think we'll also get into what are they going to replace them with? Because I hope they're going to do something. It just can't be, you can't have social workers. They're busy responding to EDP jobs and everything else. So I don't think you can have them responding to demonstrations. So I'm sorry I ranted, but I think we're down a bad path, and it's going to be chaotic for everybody in the city. Every citizen in the city is going to see this nightmare. There's been times, Tony, you've been on the jobs where they take up the whole street. They're not even supposed to be taking up the whole street.
Yep.
And people can't get in. Ambulances can't get across. Fire departments can't get across. It's crazy.
But now, like you said, with the settlement agreement, we're supposed to give them that street temporarily.
Yeah.
And allow them to march, in the street temporarily, or take over a sidewalk temporarily, as part of the settlement agreement. So I'm going to disagree with you that I don't think that Mamdani is going to disband the SRG because his voter base wanted him to. I believe that he is an activist. He's a socialist activist at heart, and that he truly believes that this SRG unit are brutalizing people, as he says in his tweet.
I agree with you, but I think he's also, people are whispering in his ear too.
No, they definitely are. And just a quick side, Steve Weiss is giving you a shout out. He's saying the good man there, real Brooklyn North Street cop before he was a CO of Disorder Control. Steve Weiss, another member of the Finest Unfiltered now. He's go back and watch his interview show. Good show. But yeah, no, I don't think that. I agree that something needs to be done. Something needs to be done. But
listen, here's like, at the end of the day, here's the issue. If the mayor-elect is going to disband SRG, right? Like Rob said, who's going to fill that void? Because if somebody is not out there, if we don't have a credible specialized unit to handle crowd control, not crowd management, but crowd control issues, respond to protests, pop-up protests that we were not planned for, and potentially civil unrest, it's not, you mark my words, it is not going to take long before the city just completely devolves into anarchy. I'm telling you that now. There's just no way around it, because the people that are out there doing this will absolutely capitalize on this and take advantage of the fact that nobody is coming to stop this and get involved in public order.
And they're already doing that. They're already capitalizing on it now. They already know how much they can get away with somebody from community affairs when they wouldn't have been able to get away from somebody from disorder control or from a strategic response group. They already capitalizing. Absolutely, 100%.
So the issue is not so much, Ron, I don't know if you whatever you want to bring it up, if you want to talk about it or whatever. I'm in the midst of writing my own op-ed.
Yeah, I think we'll hold off onto that. Okay. That'll be, I think, more of a response to what Mamdani's plan is.
Okay. All right.
But
yeah, something you can't just take them off the playing field and create a void like that and expect, so he's basically pitching the idea of let's disband SRG, but he didn't follow through with what's going to replace it or what's that going to look like, and from my point of view, personally, I'm not going to sit here and say that I necessarily have an issue with disbanding SRG and recreating something else. But if you do that, please take a look at what we originally laid out and what has evolved in the last 10 years since we put that out. We have learned so exponentially, we have learned so much about how crowds behave, personal protective equipment standardizing different facets of public order work that you really need to put some real thought into what SRG is going to become if you're going to get rid of it, or what we can do with SRG to enhance it and bring it up to what its original core mission was supposed to be.
All right. So since we're talking about what are we going to do moving forward, right? Ari's got a couple of different questions. We'll get to the questions in a little bit. You want one about the kettling and our opinions on kettling and pepper spray and everything else. But you comment about them costing $4 million in settlements. Couldn't we have used better tactics? Listen, those were settlements. They were part of a settlement agreement that nobody here on this platform agrees with. We think that that was entered into in bad faith, and that it's a political time, and a lot of politics were involved in that, as opposed to
Ron, let me just jump in.
Yeah.
As far as the settlement agreement and the lawsuits are concerned, right? So I saw something pop up there about $4 million. That $4 million was kind of solely related to creating, and the oversight for the settlement agreement itself is just $4 million. Do you know how much 2020 cost the city of New York when you take into consideration all the other lawsuits that came out of that? You're looking at about $35 million that the city's paid out as a result of everything that happened in 2020, right? And the hundreds of officers that were hurt, the hundreds of vehicles that we lost, the thousands of businesses, I think it was around 1,000 businesses that were looted and vandalized, right? So here's my thing. I'm not like, we can pay out, we can keep settling lawsuits that come agency, and I tell this to agencies all over the country. You can absolutely, you could settle and keep paying out, right? And an immature mentality of maybe younger police officers, because this is the way I thought about it when I first came on the job. When I was first in the patrol borough task forces and I was out there doing my thing, in the back of my mind as a young rookie cop, I'm thinking, well, listen, we have to take control of the situation. I don't care how it gets done. We have to maintain public order. And if that means we're going to get a lawsuit off of it, so be it. We'll deal with that later on. I don't really care. It's not coming out of my pocket. I'm not writing the check for it. And I think we're kind of being we're not seeing the bigger picture when we think like that, right? Because think about, if the city of New York didn't have to pay out $35 million as a result of what happened in 2020, what could we have done with that $35 million, right? And I tell smaller agencies, I'm like, do you think that if you didn't have to pay out millions of dollars in a lawsuit, that money could have been used to negotiate getting better equipment for you, maybe working towards getting better benefits for you, whatever? So yeah, in reality, we're not personally writing the check for that. However, it does have a trickle down effect to the officers that are out there working when we're paying out millions and millions of dollars in lawsuits, right? So I don't want to see the city saying, all right, we entered into this settlement agreement and we're done with it. We're really not, because the thing is, if SRG was created the way that we had envisioned back in 2013, and they were trained to the level of specialization and had the credibility where they were the premier public order units in the country, and they were doing things the right way and given the training that I wanted to give them, then maybe, just maybe, we wouldn't have been forced into this settlement agreement. And because we're now forced into the settlement agreement, we're now forced into doing things that maybe we don't necessarily agree with. And we have to now change our policies. We have to change our training. And it's now, instead of us creating it proactively the way that we want to, we're now reacting to something that's forced upon us that we may not necessarily agree with, or that may not necessarily be best practices all the way around. And I just think that we should be not just the NYPD, but agencies all across the country get out ahead of this. Because listen, I'm going to tell you now that you saw the foreshadowing that we had back in 2013. I'm telling you now that all of this protest activity with what's going on with ICE and the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and everything else that's going, this is not going away anytime soon. We're still going to keep having these issues with protests and demonstrations that may potentially devolve into civil unrest. And we can't keep doing the same thing over and over again and getting forced into settlement agreements instead of jumping out in front of it and trying to train our troops and getting the best equipment and training that we can for our units.
You know, the problem also is the city just pays money out.
Yes.
Under Giuliani, I believe it was, where he stopped paying them out and made them actually, go through the whole lawsuit, because the city would just, if it's under 25,000, they would just pay out. And because of the mass amount of people that sued during the protests, that drummed up the amount of money that they gave out. I think a problem also was on a large scale. If you look throughout the city, they made up mobile field forces, and those mobile field forces were of regular police officers from the precincts and detective bureau, narcotics, and their disorder control training was diminished. That was no longer, right. It only some of it was going to SRG, and there wasn't that widespread that everybody was getting. If you remember, under yourself or under Tommy Graham, you would do those, the mobilizations. You would have disorder control training with Randall's Island. I know when I was anti-crime, I went out there as a protester one time. But the point is that when you start bringing in other units that aren't familiar with it too, and there's no front leadership to push forward the right groups, then it was just a free for all. And I watched some of it, and some of it was necessary because it was seen at such a wide scale. And I was down in the village, and we would drive down a block, and like every store was getting looted. It was almost impossible. They would run, but they would run with their jackets or whatever they took, And I remember Harry Whedon stopped a car, was from New Jersey, filled with jackets from one of the stores. And we ended up arresting like 4 people in the car. I don't even know how they sat in the car because there were so many jackets. But the case ended up getting dropped too. So I mean, there's a lot of factors here. But to your point, yeah, they weren't set up to be the premier unit. They weren't set up. The mission was put in a different perspective, right? Like you said, the times had changed or whatever, and we were not prepared for this riot, a citywide riot all over. Talking, every borough was having stuff going on, and the mobile field forces, although a great concept of I think it's 1, 8, 5, and 40. Is a great concept, but if those persons aren't trained, that's only going to lead to internal disorder within the department. Exactly. So I think the department as a whole has to make this decision. I think it's up to the police commissioner, and she should be briefing Mamdani on this is the direction that we need to go. And yeah, if you want to fine tune it or change it a little bit, go ahead. But to disband it and get rid of it, that's not the answer. Like somebody said earlier in the chat, and I forget who it was, and I apologize, but, are they just going to change it to the Strategic Response Group, to the Strategic Response Team? Is it going to be something like that? I mean, we look at the downfalls of the things that happen in the city. When you look at the disbanding of anti-crime, the weaponization of the UF-250, stop, question, and frisk reports, that once that starts to fall apart, you have problems. Shootings went up, things went up, homicides went up. So, they'll tell you it's down, but that's a lot of BS too. So I think it needs to be a reset, and it needs to be done then correctly. So.
Great.
Ron?
No, I'm not disagreeing with anything that any of you say. I don't know. I'm just. It has to be addressed, and he's going to come in, he's going to disband, but what does that mean? What does that look like? You know,
I don't think that has even been thought out yet. I think
I agree.
I think it's just a reaction to maybe I don't know. I'm not inside the mayor-elect's head to be able to say this, but maybe it's a knee-jerk reaction to the constituents to say we're going to disband SRG and that pacify and make everybody happy.
That's
But
what he
what
thinks is going to happen. Right.
Right, but we didn't think through, like, and what's the contingency on that, or what options do we have when that falls apart? Because, like I said before, I will guarantee you 100%, if you do away with SRG and something doesn't fill that void that has specialized training and equipment and credibility to be able to handle what's going on with these protests, we will absolutely devolve into anarchy in the city. There's no doubt about it.
And if he thinks he's going to do something like they do in the Midwest in Ohio, where you have a liaison in the group or a group organizer, and you're going to be able to, peacefully tell them, hey, you can't go down this street or you can't go down street, and you think that these people are going to listen, you're out of your mind, because that's not going to happen. Okay, because that's what that was the idea of putting the community affairs officers in there. Oh, we're gentle and no. And you know what? Even if that organizer says, okay, this group, we're going to go this way, and the group's going to go, yeah, right, we're going this way. So it's not going to happen.
So Rob, this is gonna be our first bone of contention, because I'm gonna disagree with you on this to a certain extent. So what and I see what Ron has up there in regard to what's going on in Columbus, Ohio. I don't know, Ron, do you want to jump into that now? Should we talk about that since Rob put the ball on the tee for me to hit?
Yeah, no, listen, because that's where he's leaning, right? He's leaning where that's what he's looking at. He's looking at the Columbus model.
I'm in favor of it, by the way. I can explain why. And you guys, I think you guys are hesitant and you're disagreeing. But I think if I explain kind of like what it looks like and how it actually works operationally, I think you might kind of change your mind a little bit and agree with it. So, in essence,
all right, go ahead. So instead of reading the article, go ahead. Go ahead.
So when we talk about policing protests and de-escalation and trying to stop a peaceful assembly from devolving into something unruly and resulting in civil disorder, we have a ton of tools in the toolbox. It could and tactics, equipment that we use, different types of things that go into it, right? And without the expertise, and it's no different than, Rob, you can relate to this with ESU, right? When you're at a door or you're at a barricaded subject, different tools for different scenarios, and there's no cookie cutter approach to this. It's all going to be dependent on a fluid, dynamic situation and knowing when to use the right tool at the right time, right?
There's no tactics manual, right? Tactics is fluid.
Exactly.
Yep.
And by the way, on a broader level, tactics that we may use in one part of the country may not work in another part of the country because it's not accepted by the public, it's not politically correct, whatever, right? So it has to be accepted, and we could go down a whole wormhole, which I'm not going to, but when you go all the way back to the 1800s, where Sir Robert Peel and the founding principles of modern day policing, the police are the public and the public are the police, right? The only difference between us is that we wear a uniform and we get paid to provide the service that is incumbent upon all people, right? That live in a community. So that being said, we have to have legitimacy within the communities that we serve. All right. And I know this sounds fancy, like, balloons and popcorn and all this stuff. But it honestly, it's real deal stuff. If we don't have the support of the public that we're serving, some tactics are just not going to be accepted. And I'll give you a case in point. water cannons and canine, right? What do we understand? I say this to my classes all the time. Why here in America? And I will tell you, over in Europe, when I went on I was selected to go on this research trip with the Department of Justice over to Europe back in 2017 as the subject matter expert for the NYPD to go see how Europe does it. We went to London, England, we went to Germany, and we saw all the different stuff that they do over there. They do water cannons and canine is one of the tactics that they use to clear crowds and do crowd control. It works phenomenally, but we can't use it here because of the inappropriate ways that it was used back in the 1960s during the civil rights movement. So the idiots back in the 1960s that were doing police and they were taking peaceful protesters and spraying them with water hoses and getting dogs to bite them as they were marching down the street peacefully, they ruined it for us. And those emotional scars have not healed, right? So they took a good tactic that we could be using today and ruined it for us, right? So all that to say, there's tools that can be used at certain times. Some are accepted, some are not. In different parts of the country, some things can be used and some things can't be. But overall, what we're looking at with Columbus, Ohio, and one of my colleagues that I've had some contact with that I work with on different things and see him at different conferences and stuff, came up with this whole Columbus model. It's based on the elaborated social identity model, right? And basically, his name is Clifford Stott. He's a social psychologist over in England. But when you look at, and I teach this all the time because there's so much to it, and you just have to have an open mind to understand it. But when we look at crowd psychology and crowd dynamics and the influence that some of the things that we do could influence tensions in the crowd and vice versa, the crowds and the police both can co-produce tensions or de-escalate tensions, right? So the whole thing with the community affairs and or these dialogue police that Columbus are using, it's a tool in the toolbox up front. Now, is it always going to work? No, Robin, you hit the nail on the head. Sometimes we may say, listen, we have the light blue shirts, right? We wear something different than the regular police, and we're the liaison between the police and the event organizers, right? And we'll go out there and we'll mingle in the crowd. We'll put a human face to what the police are. We'll facilitate instead of trying to be confrontational. We'll facilitate what needs to be done. And what they're looking to do. Now, are there times where we say, hey, we need you to go down this street? And they say, F you, we're going this way. Of course, it's not always going to work. But give it an opportunity to try to de-escalate up front. And now I'm not saying that we're not going to have resources out of sight, out of mind, that we're ready to come in at a moment's notice and take control of the situation if we need to. But why not start off trying to facilitate somebody's First Amendment rights as opposed to being confrontational about it up front, right? And did we lose Rob? Is Rob there, or did he? Did I piss him off that much that he decided to go 90
He said
years?
he's done. He said he's done. He jumped out.
All right.
I'm sure he'll come back in.
All right. Hopefully he comes back.
I'm sure he should be in the studio. I don't see him in the studio.
All right. Well, so anyway, me and you will carry on, Ron.
He'll come back in. Now, listen, I hear exactly what you're saying, and I want to wait till Rob comes back because I don't disagree with some of what you're saying, but I just don't think that a lot of it is possible in today's protests. I think that a lot of today's protests. Let me just text him and see. See where he went. He might have lost power or something. I don't know. But I don't think that a lot of it is going to be possible in today's protests. When you have protests like you had it at the synagogue 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, it's a scheduled, planned protest. You know who the protest event organizers are. You know who you're dealing with. You know the organization that's going to be there for the most part. That doesn't mean that there aren't going to be agitators in the crowd. That doesn't mean that there aren't going to be people that aren't in line with the protest organizer and that are antagonists to them as well. because just because there's antagonists in the crowd doesn't mean it's an antagonistic crowd.
Right.
You know?
Yep.
So,
That's correct.
so you know, I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah, he lost power. That's exactly what happened. He lost power. So hopefully he can get it back on. Maybe he can jump on his phone. Hold on. I don't know if they're having storms in Florida. Are you near him?
No, I'm on the East Coast. He's over on the West Side. So
He might even be up in New York right now.
What's that?
So just because, like I said, there's antagonists in the crowd doesn't mean it's an antagonistic crowd. Doesn't mean that the entire crowd is doing it. But you know, those with the loudest voices.
And so, Ron, that's actually one of the premises of this elaborated social identity model that the dialogue police model is based off of, is that we understand now that crowds, when they gather, they're not homogenous. In other words, if I'm going to go to a protest, I may go with you and Rob, and then I meet up with other groups of people who I don't even know, and we just come together as independent groups of people that come together. We're not one entire homogenous group, right? So we have different values and different ideas of why we're there and what we want to protest about and how much we want to get involved in the protest, right? The thing that what the elaborated social identity model says, though, and I'm trying to keep this as simple as I can.
Please keep it simple, stupid.
Keep it simple, stupid. But in other words, I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a crowd of 100 people that are peacefully protesting, and 2 people in the 100 throw a rock or a bottle at the police. The response to that should not be, we've just declared this an unlawful assembly and we pepper spray all 100 people. The response should be, let's differentiate who the criminal actors are, go in and grab those 2 people that were criminal actors and allow the other 98 peaceful people to continue and facilitate the peaceful assembly. Just because the 2 people engaged in criminal activity, as you just said, doesn't mean that everybody is criminal actors in the crowd, right? So by doing that, that's what we're trying to facilitate and where we're trying to get to with that. So if we were to pepper spray the entire crowd and declare an unlawful assembly, those other 98 people that came as separate little groups, now crowd psychology says they band together, and all of a sudden it becomes an us versus them mentality because they see what you just did as illegitimate. And why did you do that to us? We're here peacefully. Why did you just pepper spray all of us? It was those 2 people that did something wrong, not us. And you just created that us versus them mentality. So by having cops that look different and can go in up front and dialogue and speak with these people and facilitate what's going on, it de-escalates right off the rip and keeps tensions at a lower scale. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to work. And there may be a time where we have to proportionately ramp up and bring other units in and have that we have out of sight, out of mind. And that's fine. But why not start off trying to facilitate the people's First Amendment rights instead of being confrontational up front with it? He's back. You're muted. You got sound?
Yeah.
You know what happened?
What?
There was a huge protest outside, and they cut my power line. And I'm telling you, it was done intentionally. I called for SRG, and nobody was available.
See what happens when you disband SRG?
I know.
I think it was Kaz sending out his drones on his last week.
That's it. He has the authority still right now.
But so what we're discussing, Rob, I don't know if you've been able to hear us.
No.
We're basically discussing about the model that's being used in Columbus, Ohio, and it basically going in and discussing it, and also being able to differentiate and identify the antagonizers in the crowd as opposed to treating the whole crowd as antagonistic. Where I say that that's going to be difficult in today's types of demonstrations, we'll call them, whatever you want to call them, civil disorder demonstrations and whatnot, is because I don't think that you have that organized. You don't have an identified organized leader that you can make contact with, right? It's I have it written down here from what I did, right? The dialogue officers, right?
Right.
When I was doing the research on it, right? The dialogue officers are going to, which in our NYPD right now, as per the settlement agreement, are the community affairs officers, right? So technically they are our dialogue officers under this model.
Yes.
You agree?
Yes, but now here's the problem. And last time I was on the show, or the 2 times before on the show, you guys actually showed a video of community affairs officers on the front lines affecting arrests.
Right.
That undermines the whole premise of dialogue policing and trying to facilitate and be mediators. At the time when arrests have to be made, those community affairs or dialogue officers need to come out, and the SRG or whoever is going to be the arrest teams need to go in. Otherwise, it undermines the whole legitimacy of why we're trying to dialogue with them, right? And that's basically the premise of this. Is it always going to work? No, I concede to that. It's not always going to work. And yes, Ron, you're right to a certain extent. When you don't have a identified leader of the group, it does make things more difficult, right? Because who do we go to when you have a pop-up protest with Palestinian supporters and they're just running all over the place, mobilizing themselves to run all over? How do we identify who the leader is? That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be trying, though. Okay, that's all I'm saying. Is that
100% today? And I put out an ex post today that, like you just said, you got the Palestinian protest and their pop-up protests, everything else. I think we've established, and it needs to be established even more, that this is a consistent group of protesters, most likely paid protesters, right? Soros-backed protesters that are going from issue to issue, protest to protest. They don't really know why they're there. They just know this is where they were told to report, right? There's an underground network where they are told to go and report. And every time you see a social media post or a news report where people go up to these protesters, very, very rarely, not always, but very rarely, is anyone able to articulate why they're really there protesting and what they're protesting against. They won't admit that they're getting paid. Some people do, right? Say, oh, they got paid whatever X amount of dollars to come here today, whatever the case may be. But these people don't even know why. They're paid protesters, they're organizers, they're activists that want to be part of it, but don't even know what they're a part of. They're just a part of being anti-society, right? Or anybody wants to be anti-Trump on whatever the issue may be. And people will go and they'll bash Trump, but then they won't be able to articulate as to why they're protesting Trump. They just don't like Trump. And then maybe they'll throw a couple of talking points out that's put out there by the mainstream media. So my point is that I want to know, because this is what we're dealing with now, right? Because the pro-Palestinian, since there's been, the conflict has calmed somewhat in the Middle East, right? We don't see those daily large pro-Palestinian protests anymore. So what do? Now they've moved on to ICE. We've discussed on past shows, the issue of how are the protesters getting to these ICE locations so quickly and the leaks that are out there. That's another topic of discussion.
Yep.
But as far as having the ability to control these crowds, to come in and affect, crowd control. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. When you're dealing with things like this.
You know what? I got another problem though here. So when you talk about this, when you have these, I forget what you call them, Ron, the people that are going to be, what are they called?
Dialogue officers.
Okay, I get a dialogue officer, and he's going to be, or he or she is going to be talking to somebody who they believe is in charge of the protest. Somebody that maybe filed for a permit if they have a permit. Somebody who started the demonstration. Now, if as we morph into different things, right, we mold and we adapt, they'll adapt. And what they'll do is they'll give you a BS person that's going to be their lead, that you can talk to. And they'll go, oh yeah, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And we're going to march down the street peacefully. And when we get to 59th Street, we're going to go across Columbus and we're going to go down to 7th, but we're going to listen to you and everything else. And then all of a sudden the crowd just says, nope, we're going down 6th Avenue. We're going to straight march. So the problem is you need a group that's going to be readily deployable with them to change it at any given moment. So you can have these liaisons, you can have the nice buttercups and group hugs in the beginning. They can take photos with the police and they can post on their Instagrams and their Twitter accounts. But when push comes to shove, if they don't follow what they're supposed to be doing, you need a group there that's going to be able to turn them and keep them there. So unless you have that, I mean, you remember we used to go on the left flank and the right flank, and we'd follow them down. And then you could have the bikes out on the streets of further out. So if something had to come in, so there has to be a tactical plan, and it has to be ready for when it gets out of control. But you can do buttercup all you want. You can do, yeah, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But I don't think it's always going to work. And yeah, for a nice peaceful demonstration or whatever, it could happen. But what happens when it gets out of control, right? If they're not there, and you don't need a one-star chief or a bureau chief or anybody else, telling, all right, I need SRG. No, SRG should be there, and then they can form those lines, those wedges, those things, the orange mesh, the things that we know and we've seen work. So,
and Rob, I don't disagree with anything that you just said. I agree with you 100%. I don't mistake what I said about dialogue policing. They are not taking the place. They're an adjunct up front to try
tool,
and escalate and keep tensions. But we always have to have that element of response to be able to handle situations and bring back order to a situation when it goes off the track. So is dialogue policing always going to work? No, it's not always going to work. And I will tell you, I could go all the way back to I was in, for all intents and purposes, I was an incident commander. This had to be 2012, 2013 down by Union Square Park in Manhattan. It was a protest. And before I even knew what the term dialogue policing meant or de-escalation or anything like that, I actually tried something. And I'll give you two quick examples of when it worked and when it didn't work. And the first one is at Union Square Park, we identified through community affairs who the event organizer was for a protest. It was a couple of dozen people that were there gathering, holding signs and doing their thing. And I actually walked up to the event organizer. I introduced myself and I said, hey, I'm a captain at the time. I was a Captain Raganella from the Disorder Control Unit. I understand you're here to do a protest, whatever. Is there anything that I could do or say to help you facilitate what it is that you're trying to do here? We want to keep things peaceful. Let me know if I can work with you and what needs to get done. And you would have thought that like this guy just saw a ghost, because he was like, he actually leaned back and said, wait, what did you just say? And I said, what? And he goes, you actually want to help me? And I go, yeah, of course. You have a First Amendment right to be able to, protest in a public space. We want to keep it peaceful. He goes, I've never heard anybody, an officer ever say that to me before. And before you know it, long story short, we were like best of friends. Everything stayed peaceful. He shook my hand after it was over. And he's like, thank you for helping us with that. I wasn't expecting that. And it was great. Then flash to the second example. I'm doing a demonstration protest outside of Rikers Island in Queens. And we identified through community affairs who the event organizer was. Same thing. I go up and I introduce myself. And the lady, I'm not going to use the language that she used, but she basically told me to go do something to myself that wasn't appropriate. And I said, man, I tried to talk to her, and I'm like, ma'am, I'm trying to help facilitate what it is. No, I don't want your help. Go away. We're gonna do what we're gonna do anyway. And I said, okay, very good. And then I told her, well, here's the ground rules of what's gonna happen. You step off the sidewalk into the street, we're gonna start making arrests. And now, so it's that layered approach. But I just think what I'm trying to impress upon everybody is that let's try to start off from here where we're at a low level and we're trying to de-escalate and keep tensions low. By all means, we have the capability behind the scenes to come out and take care of business if we need to. But let's try with the dialogue police first and use that crowd psychology and keep things at a lower level where it's at a normal level more than anything else before it escalates to that point.
You know what
like
the
I said,
problem?
it's not always going to work.
It's not, and because you know what the problem is. As soon as they see now, because of the stigma that's been attached to the SRG, as soon as they see the SRG police, it immediately elevates them. That there's going to be violence. There's going to be we're going to have to make CCRBs because they're going to be this. They're going to be mean when they're just walking alongside of them. So there's also a stigma right now that's attached because of all the publicity they got from the 2020 riots when they I felt they acted appropriately. That was chaotic. So I can't say they did anything wrong. But yeah, I'm not saying don't use every tool in your toolbox. Absolutely. If you can manipulate or not even manipulate, if you can portray that this is the way it's going to go, we'll work with you. And if it's not, then we'll do other things. But yeah, absolutely. I don't say don't not give it a try. It's the same thing with a barricaded EDP, right? You don't break down the door and take them into custody. You say, hey, open the door. So yeah, I agree 100%. I agree. It's definitely a tool.
I just gotta jump in for 1 second on a note, guys. This is a First Amendment supporting platform, but we're not going to allow anyone to speak in a derogatory manner in the chat. Carmine has been banned for spewing racial epithets at some of our other viewers. So just so everyone knows that's not going to be tolerated, that the chat is monitored, and that Carmine's been removed. Sorry.
That's good. We want to keep this First Amendment, right? Content neutral and not disparage other people. We all have differing opinions, but this is not a place for that. Listen, guys, all this to say, I hope that the little bit that we just talked about for the last hour and a half or so, I hope that there's an appreciation of what goes in to being a field commander or an incident commander at the scene of this stuff, because all of the stuff that we're talking about has to be triaged in real time in a fluid, dynamic situation to know, where do I set up a line? What tool do I have available to me? Is this going to work? Who are the criminal actors? Who are the peaceful protesters? Who are the counter demonstrators? Like, there's so much that goes into it. And then on top of all of that, you have the media that's there. Where does the media go? Can I let the media into this area? Like, there's so much that goes into policing public order events with demonstrations and protests, and trying not to get it to go off the rails to where it becomes a disorderly event where it becomes looting and rioting. That you really have to specialize. There has to be a specialization to this, and you can't just on the fly take a precinct commander and thrust him into an incident commander role and say, here you go, deal with this, because they don't have, it's not their fault, but the department is not giving the training that I was talking about in 2013. They're just not giving it to the executive level. And unfortunately, listen, I love my task force people. I love when they were task force, now SRG, the men and women of SRG, God bless them. They're doing the best they can with what they have. Mm-hmm. I just don't think we're giving them everything we could be giving them. And it's unfortunate because they're out there taking the bumps and the bruises and doing the best they can with what they got. But we have more to offer them. And we need Mayor-elect Mamdani and whoever else, and Commissioner Tisch, whoever's going to oversee this. We have to put thoughtfulness into it if we're going to disband SRG. Something has to fill the void that has to be better than what we had. And otherwise, we're going down a bad avenue. Bad
All
avenue.
right. Well, Mayor-elect Mamdani saw what I'll show it again. These are from the ICE operation that was going on in Chinatown last week. So we're not going to get into the tactics of it, but what I'm saying in there is you have SRG there, and they're trying to clear the street, and there's no organized protest there. This is civil disorder. This is not a place for
Dialogue police.
Dialogue officers. I have to keep
Correct.
looking at my notes, right? This is not a place for dialogue officers because there's nobody leading that crowd, okay? And time again, we see this, right? We just saw it in Chicago. They beat ICE there. They chased ICE off the street.
You're on Maple.
And again, they wind up chasing ICE off the street because ICE doesn't have local police to back them up, right? Because then they're going to be accused of violating sanctuary city laws and assisting ICE in deportation matters, which is not the case. Once again, I wrote about that today. That's not the case. This is not violations of the sanctuary city laws. We've discussed this in the past. We're not assisting them in their deportation operations. That's their federal mandate, okay? That's their job. What they're actually doing is violating federal law by impeding the federal officers from doing that. And I know you have the statutes, right? Because this is your forte. But it's just, it can't, what I'm saying is today's protests aren't the protests of 10 years ago, of 6 years ago.
Which exactly hits the nail on the head as to why I'm out there preaching and trying to educate that the tactics and the energy of the protesters today and the tactics that they're using are not what they were 10 or 15 years ago. But what the police are doing hasn't evolved commensurate with what's going on. And we need to get the police to that point where we can deal with that. Now, the clips that you just showed, I'll agree with you. I'm not putting dialogue police out there for that. That's not, that dialogue police is something that happens way up front with, a permitted or a planned event, or even a pop-up event, if we can identify who the people are, right? But when it gets to the point of what you just showed, that's not time for talking and trying to, pass out balloons and be lovey-dovey with people. At that point, we have to rein in what's going on. And Ron, to your point with what's going on with ICE and everything, I'm a resident of Florida now. This is a completely different world down here.
You're going to send the chat off on you now that you fled to Florida.
Well, I did. I escaped Alcatraz. But to my point earlier, different parts of the country deal with things differently, right? So it seems that in the bigger Democratic-led cities is where we're seeing these issues with mayors and elected officials saying, my police are not going to partake in ICE raids or involved in immigration enforcement, and that's fine. Like it is what it is. That's fine. However, and Ron, you and I had this conversation earlier. But as a police officer, you can't expect a police agency to stand there and do nothing while other federal agencies are getting their asses kicked, right? While we may not partake in actually serving immigration warrants and doing other types of stuff with the law, federal laws, may not be our job. That's fine. But we do have a job to maintain public order and maintain safety in an area where they may be working, right? And that we have to draw that line.
100%. And to Stephen S., thanks for joining us. A big supporter of the entire network. I've met Stephen on a couple of occasions. Appreciate you. Police used to take care of business, and everyone knew it. He's a former LAPD, right? Lack of fear and force, and too much emphasis on de-escalation. I'm going to push back a bit, but to a certain point, I understand what Stephen S. is saying. It's a little more old school train of thought. However, I think the pendulum has swung too far, and where the people in these protests know that the police aren't going to do anything. They're not going to take back the streets. They're not going to take care of business, as it seems. It's rare that you see the police as forceful as you saw them acting in that one video where they were escorting the ICE vehicles, which we spoke about last week. They should have actually just stayed in the garage until the area was clear and had a clear path. We shouldn't be walking down the street escorting ICE. But again, that's not assisting them in their deportation operation, as was portrayed by the left politicians, right? That's not what they were doing. They were trying to maintain order and to free up a passage for them to leave, not to actually get involved in the enforcement of whatever their mandate was. So there's the problem where they're coming out and they kind of know that for the most part, the police aren't going to do that. They're not going to be pepper spraying them when they get involved, that they're not going to be pushing them back. We don't see anybody with a nightstick anymore, a PR-24, a nightstick, an asp, nothing. Nobody's got helmets. You're not allowed to look even threatening, right? And it's not even a matter of looking threatening. It's officer safety, which is another issue, right? Just because we look like stormtroopers. No, we're protecting ourselves from the airmail that you're throwing at us. You're throwing 200-pound flower pots into the street and things like that. So that's where I have a problem. And that's where I just, time and time again, we're not talking about allowing people to voice their opposition to any party, to any policy, to any group. We're not trying to stifle that in any way, shape, or form. You don't see the organized protests anymore. Everything are these pop-up protests. They're communicating via WhatsApp and other things of strategically placing themselves in locations by monitoring the locations of the police and of ICE. And they have tactics against us. They have tactical manuals that they hand out.
100%.
Against us.
100%.
So that's where I find it problematic with trying to push forward, the
dialogue police.
Dialogue. I can't get it for some reason. The dialogue police. Yeah, I have no problem with community affairs establishing a liaison with a permitted, pre-planned event. It's what we do. It's what we've already done, though, Tony. We've already done that. We've always done that. As a precinct commander, every event that I have set a detail for, I personally met with or had my executive officer, my community affairs, sit down with them, go over what their intentions were, go over the ground rules, tell them where they're going to be staged, everything else. Going over all of this, having that liaison. I have no problem with having a liaison. Aria is in here. She's saying that she wants to go out and she wants to protest the genocide and everything else. That's fine. That is her right 100%. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about somebody that wants to stand with sight and sound of what or who they are protesting, and verbalizing and peacefully protesting whatever they want to protest. I don't care what it is. We're not putting any emphasis on what is being protested. It's irrelevant.
Exactly.
What's being protested.
Exactly.
It means nothing to us. We are supposed to be apolitical as a police force.
We're content neutral. I don't care what you're protesting about. It makes no difference to me. As long as you assemble peacefully, that's all I need. Peaceful assembly is fine. You could do it all day long, anytime you want. That's fine. And again, I'm not suggesting that when you have these pop-up flash mobs that come together and run down the street throwing flower pots, I'm not suggesting that that's the time to throw out dialogue policing into the middle of that, dialogue offices. It's not. So again, it goes back to the right tool in the box at the right time, right? It's just another tool in the toolbox that should be used appropriately at the right time. And that what the clips that you showed, in my opinion, that's not the right time to be bringing them out. So I think in the end, I think we kind of all pretty much agree to a certain extent on the availability of the options that are available and that they need to be used at the right time and right place.
I think that the training is a big issue though, because when you look at them escorting ICE down the block, that was a point where John and Eric, Ron, we all spoke about it. Stop what you're doing, make a line, okay? Cover your left and your right flanks and walk down the street. Have arrest teams behind that line like we used to do, right? If we came up to a point where we were going to arrest somebody, we open the line. The arrest team goes out, grabs that person, brings them back into the line. The things that we were taught. So they're not doing that anymore. They're literally walking down the street, chasing after everybody, no organization. Now, did it just pop up? Absolutely. But we can hold and reestablish, right? Even ESU will do a tactical retreat, not afraid to pull back and reset. And I just don't think that's done. I also, to your point earlier, Tony, the training in the police department does not encompass the executives to know what to do for these type of incidences. So what do? They will get me SRG because they're going to come and save me. And then SRG comes and then they get in trouble because they did that. No, you don't need to know what's going on. It was the same thing what I always said. I thought everybody that made captain should spend a month with an ESU captain and learn what to handle, how a barricade job goes. Why we asking you to get off the floor? Why are things done this way? Because then they understand it and then they could handle the job even before an ESU captain got there. So if you don't do the training, if you don't do this executive training, and you could even start at sergeant and lieutenant, so they're trained up for it. So when they do get promoted, they understand it, and then everybody knows, everybody's on the same page. But right now, the training, and I was on the training committee for the reorganization, right? Or what I forget what he called it now with Bratton. But half of the things that I suggested, it went over to the police academy, like, oh, we can't do that. It takes up too much time. Oh, we can't do this. Everybody's like, I can't. And then they complain when it's not done. That's the problem with the police department. And now you're going to disband this group and put what in? Nothing in its place and not train anybody up to it? I think you need to maybe pull back, refresh the members of SRG, and train them and bring them up to speed. And then you can set them back out. And if you want to change policy, you want to change procedures, you want to put different people in, that's fine. You want to start with different tools? Absolutely. Get community affairs more involved. Get whatever you guys are calling them. I forget now.
Dialogue police.
Police.
But do that. Do all of those things, and then set the tone. But it can't just be arbitrary. You can't just like, oh, I'm gonna get rid of everybody. And that to my point with this whole thing, like you just can't just get rid of a unit just because you think it's bad. No, if there's a problem with the unit, fix it. You know what happens next? ESU shoots an EDP, emotionally disturbed person. Oh, let's get rid of ESU. Now you don't do that. You adapt improvise and overcome.
Right.
And they're not
But
doing it.
The problem is when you have the leadership that does not want to look at it. Somebody coming in, right? Mayor-elect Mamdani coming in and is a complete activist at heart. He's a socialist, right? He can apologize on the campaign trail all he wants. He's a defund the policer. He's not going to increase the head count, right? So that becomes problematic. So let's just look real quick at Mayor Mamdani's response to those videos that I just showed you from last week's ICE operation that went south. Let's take a look at that, and then we'll talk briefly, because we got to be off by 7:30. I'm sorry. We talk briefly about what we really think he should do with SRG, instead of, like you said, just disband them and not just rebrand them, but let's give them a true mission, a true, clearer mission. If you want to pull them back from certain things, they have to be given a clear mission. And we'll get into Tony. You brought it up a little earlier. I know you're working on an op-ed that you're going to get put out there. You're more than welcome to put it up on our platform. But you let me know. But I have an excerpt of that of what your vision is. But let's listen to what Mayor-elect Mamdani, and this is a man who's going to be mayor in 3 weeks.
He's going to be the boss of the police department.
He's going to be the mayor of the city of New York in 3 weeks.
Weekend, ICE attempted to raid Canal Street and detain our immigrant neighbors. As mayor, I'll protect the rights of every single New Yorker, and that includes the more than 3 million immigrants who call this city their home. But we can all stand up to ICE if you know your rights. If you encounter ICE, these are the things that every New Yorker should know. First, ICE cannot enter into private spaces like your home, school, or a private area of your workplace without a judicial warrant signed by a judge. That looks like this. If ICE does not have a judicial warrant signed by a judge, you have the right to say, "I do not consent to entry," and the right to keep your door closed. Sometimes ICE will show you paperwork that looks like this and tell you that they have the right to arrest you. That is false. ICE is legally allowed to lie to you, but you have the right to remain silent. If you're being detained, you may always ask, "Am I free to go?" repeatedly until they answer you. You are legally allowed to film ICE as long as you do not interfere with an arrest. It is important to remain calm during any interaction with ICE or law enforcement. Do not impede their investigation, resist arrest, or run. One last thing. New Yorkers have a constitutional right to protest, and when I'm mayor, we will protect that right. New York will always welcome immigrants, and I will fight each and every day to protect, support, and celebrate our immigrant brothers and sisters.
Great.
Listen, some of the things he said in there I have no problem with, right? People understanding their rights, I have no problem with that. People having the right to protest, he's 100% right. I agree with that 100%. They have the right to protest. Where is his support for the police? Yeah, he mentioned don't fight, don't, that wasn't, listen, what was the message there? What's the true message? He got his legalese in. He got his, don't fight, be peaceful, blah, blah. But that's not what's going on. That's not what's going on. What's the message that comes out of that? Anybody tell me. You guys tell me. Chat, tell me. What is Aria? Tell me, what is Mayor Mamdani's message, Mayor-elect Mamdani's message in that message that he put out? They're doing their job. Listen, we all have said this in the past, right? We said it on this show, we said it on the past shows, we said it on every show on this network. Okay? The feds have a job to do. If this is a sanctuary city and it's going to be a mandate that we not physically assist them or administratively assist them in deportation operations, so be it. Nobody's on. Listen, what our personal feelings are, but if that's the law, that's the law. That's not what's going on here, though. That's not what's going on here. And to have all this rhetoric about how dangerous ICE is and have the commissioner come out and chastise the federal agents that they're going to get the police and the public hurt by their operation. By what? By doing their job. That's their job. You don't have to agree with it. There are people that don't agree with the NYPD's job, but they have a job to do. Does that mean that we're going to allow them to be lawless because you don't like that the NYPD enforces laws? Well, if you're Alvin Bragg, well, then you're just not going to prosecute them. But how is this?
So Ron, the message, that clip that you just showed, the message, if I was the mayor, the message should have been something along the lines of, while we support your constitutional right to peacefully assemble and protest, you may not necessarily agree with all the policies of our current presidential administration and federal government right now. However, that does not give you the right to interfere with federal agencies conducting their job while they're doing enforcement work. So yes, you could protest. You may not like what is being done, but that does not extend to the right for you to interfere with what it is that they're doing. And I don't know that that was really the message that was sent out in that clip.
He's basically given the illegal immigrants a way to get out of these type of ICE enforcements.
Yeah, Rob, I don't know if you noticed or not, but in that clip, he never once said the word illegal.
No, of course not.
He talks about immigrants, but he's not using the word
immigrant
illegal.
neighbors. He's going to protect his immigrant neighbors.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, here's the thing, helping ICE go down the street, that's not working with ICE or anything else. That's keeping the street open. I think what we get away from is we talk about what do the normal citizens of the city think, okay, when they can't get across the street, when an ambulance can't get to them. I watched during the 2020 riots when there were fires and the fire department couldn't get down the street. So they have to understand that these things that are being done and just allowing the protesters to go wherever and not have SRG part of it is going to lead to chaos in the city, and the chaos is going to cause death and injuries to people. So, and how do you stop it? Well, if you had a decent police commissioner, she should be able to tell them and explain to them what we can do and develop a plan. Develop a strategic plan of how you need to restructure the strategic response group and what you feel you can implement that's going to make the transition to this new type of team better. And you could have the new chief of department, Mike LaPetri. I mean, he's been out there, put his 2 cents in. They all need to come together and stand up and tell Mamdani, this is our plan and this is how we're going to do it. And at least try. I mean, if at least put your foot forward. These are your personnel. So I mean, you got to fight a little bit for it. And we know that they are a necessary, a detail. So
Here's my shameless dirty plug for myself. I'm available as a consultant to work with these people.
There you go.
If Mayor-elect Mamdani is watching or his people are watching, I'm available. Like, I mean, this can be done. It can be done the right way where, citizens are able to exercise their First Amendment rights without encumbering other people that want free passage to be able to come and go from work. And there's a way to do it and get it right and have an actual elite unit that would be an example for the whole country. but you got to make the commitment. It's going to require a financial commitment. It's going to require training. And Rob, you said something before that I didn't get a chance to comment on, but you hit the nail on the head about what there's always been, and this is going way back when, and I've tried to correct it so many times, and unfortunately I failed. I wasn't successful in getting it done, but there's always been a disconnect at the executive level with getting them trained to understand what needs to be done. The men and women of SRG, I could train them to do anything. They're great. They do the work that they're supposed to do. But when you have an incident commander come in that has no requisite training on any of this, they don't understand the capabilities of what, it's kind of like taking a patrol guy or a patrol boss and putting him with ESU at the door and putting him in the stack, and he's going to lead, and he has no idea it's not going to work. Yet the executives have to be trained on this stuff to understand all the nuances of what goes on. And until we get to that point, we're just
100%.
the same mistakes.
And Jose Vega mentioned it in the chat too. He said they used to get
Yes.
a 1-day course, and you know what? That's not enough.
No.
I agree. He's 100% right. But you know what? What is in captain school? I think it was the advanced leader training or whatever it was. What one day at disorder control? You know what I was wondering? What time are we getting out of here? That's all.
Right.
That's all.
Right.
Because that's it. You know what? You need to go out with the teams. You need to go out and see what they do and understand it. But 1-day training, yeah, that's great. We took a tour of the basement of the 4-4. It was fun. That was great. Or the old 4-4. That's all fun. But you know what? You need to be out there and you need to really see it and understand it. And you need a lot of refresher courses too, because it's something that you forget about.
It's perishable skill, and you have to. It can't just be a one and done training. Yeah. And I'll tell you the executives over in Europe, where they really do a great job of doing this stuff. The incident commanders over in London Metropolitan Police Services, you can't even be an incident commander at the scene of one of these things unless you're certified. You've gone through the College of Policing and you're certified to lead in an incident like this. Otherwise, you can't do it, and you have to go for refresher training, recertification, because they recognize that this is something. I mean, look at the outcome when you get it wrong. Just look at what happened in 2020, and we can go all the way back to 1992 with Rodney King. We're still making the same mistakes over and over and over again, and until we as a country and a law enforcement profession recognize that there's a better way of doing it and we can enhance our skills and get it right, we're just going to keep making these same mistakes, and it's a shame.
I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but just in fact, incident command, right? An operations section chief, a logistics chief. We don't do that. The fire department does it.
Yes.
Absolutely, unequivocally right. And they have an incident management team. They do everything right. We're just as a police department, we're walking aimlessly around. We don't even know where the incident commander is. The incident commander most of the time is walking inside of a crime scene to see what happened. Oh, let me see. I got to get eyes on. But no, you really don't. But all right. So I don't, you don't even know who you're going to, what resources you need. I mean, we as an organization, I know Gianelli, when he was the chief of patrol, he tried to implement some of the stuff to go down to Teeks down in Texas and learn specifics for incident command and the whole incident command structure. And that was done. And then what you were going to do is when you come back to a scene, I would take over operations section chief because I would know that or whatever. Somebody else would be the incident commander, but that fell by the wayside. So it's the lack of training and the complacency that we see in the police department. Because here's the problem: when people get promoted, they don't suddenly have open. And I always say it all the time: they don't open up a box up at the PC's office and all this knowledge comes out of the box and goes in your head and you know everything. And the skies open up and now I'm a commander. No bullshit. All right, you're just a guy to pass the test. That's all you are. So you got to learn, and if you don't learn, then you get trained on it, and that's how you learn, and then you implement that learning, and that's the problem. That's what we're not doing. Let's just disband something. Let's get rid of it. It's not work. No. If we need to progress, if there's something wrong with it, let us change it. Let us make it better. But just to set, my politics says get rid of it. I'm going to get rid of it. You're gonna fail, and you're gonna fail the people and the city of New York. You're gonna feel the residents, the commuters, everybody else. Okay, when I can't get home on the train to take the path back to New Jersey, I'm gonna get pissed off. Businesses are gonna fail. You're gonna see a lot of problems. That's my rant.
Agreed.
All right. Wow. Turning red on me, Rob. Listen, Aria's got a, as usual, she's very active in the chat, and that's fine. But I got to push back a little bit. She's talking about, ICE detained 6-year-old and his dad in Astoria. They separated them. The child was unaccounted for an extremely long time. I protested that. They were going to an appointment in immigration court. Aria, just because you didn't know where they were doesn't mean that the child was unaccounted for. Whenever an adult is arrested and they're in the accompaniment of a minor, the minor is taken into protective custody. That's the rules. You're not going to not arrest somebody because they have a child with them. That's not the way it works. If someone gets arrested for anything and they're watching a child and there's a child in their custody, that child is taken into protective custody. And like you said, the child was unaccounted for. The child wasn't walking the streets. The child was in the care and custody of the federal agents. Just because they didn't tell you where they were and they didn't tell some pundit Democrat that wants to yell and scream that you're separating families, tell me where they are, and they didn't tell them where they were, doesn't mean that they were unaccounted for. I'm sorry. And then, you made another comment about that they're undocumented, not illegal. They're illegal. They entered this country illegally. You even say, crossing the border is a misdemeanor. A misdemeanor is a crime. If you break and you commit a misdemeanor, you've committed an illegal act. So you're here in this country illegally, not just undocumented. It's illegal. There are legal means and legal ways to come into this country. Under the Biden administration, they didn't enforce these rules. That doesn't mean the rules weren't there. They didn't enforce them. They opened the borders, let the people come pouring in. That doesn't mean that they came in to the country legally. So they are illegal immigrants. They're not just undocumented. I'm sorry. I just had to get that off my chest. Anybody? Hello?
We were just admiring your analysis. So that's all. I don't disagree. Listen, how many times you were in where a domestic violence occurred and you had to effect an arrest of somebody, or you might have a cross complainants and the husband and the wife were both arrested and you have a child. That doesn't mean you didn't make the arrest, right? And then that child went into protective custody. That's all. And you know what? Yeah, the notifications were made. I don't necessarily think somebody was missing for that long time. I mean, there was a procedure and a routine that they did. So, I mean, you have to do what you have to do. It doesn't elude, like somebody said, you're using a child as a shield. Well, that's bad too. There was somebody I saw protesting the other day with a child. All right. That doesn't mean you're not going to get arrested. And you know what? To me, that's a really stupid thing, because if you do get arrested and you're gonna push the envelope where you want to get arrested, then your child's going to be put into a location that you probably don't want that child to be in. So just be a little smarter that way too. I mean, that's really ridiculous. So Tony, you're going to take the position if Mamdani calls you. Somebody said I wouldn't even answer the phone, but Mamdani calls you tomorrow and says, "Hey Tony, can you help me organize the strategic response groups and help me along with demonstrations?"
I am 100% available.
All right.
Listen, listen. Whether personalities aside, whatever, there's a job that needs to be done, and my heart and soul is still with the men and women of the NYPD that have to go out and do this work. I've dedicated my retired life to going out around the country and sometimes internationally about educating how to do officers getting hurt while protecting citizens' rights, and that unfortunate delicate balance that has to take place. So there's a right way to do it, and I'm more than happy to. I don't want to see New York City, go down that rabbit hole where they crash and burn because we decided that we're going to disband the unit that needs to be there, and not fill the void with something else. I'm available. I'm available.
The thing is here's the thing: there are ways to correct the problem, and not to do or restructure it, but don't eliminate it. You don't need to eliminate something. You need to change the direction. You need to remold it. Absolutely, there's things that can be done, but you don't need to just say eliminate it and get it off my plate, unless you're bowing down to your promises before the election. That's all.
Right.
All right, we got to move it along. I'm just going to read. This is an excerpt from an op-ed that Tony's working on. Civil unrest experts stress that effective public order response requires a very specific skill set: understanding crowd psychology, identifying community tension indicators, communicating with protest organizers, distinguishing peaceful actors from hostile ones. We've talked about most of this, and making proportionate, lawful, tactical decisions under pressure in an effort to de-escalate and facilitate citizens' rights. These skills cannot be picked up on the fly or absorbed through regular patrol experiences. To be blunt, when an untrained officer attempts to police major protests or quell civil unrest, bad things can happen very quickly. The stakes are not merely operational. They are political and social. Effective public order policing squarely depends on legitimacy. Without public trust, even lawful police actions may be interpreted as abuses, and even necessary interventions can inflame tensions. Police legitimacy is tough to obtain, easy to lose, and difficult to rebuild. And when I read what you had sent me, this stuck out to me because, especially that last part with the legitimacy, I think that when you have someone who is the leader of the city and they're not giving us legitimacy, we are so far behind the eight ball and have such an uphill battle. And we only have a couple of minutes to discuss it, but that to me is what stuck out. Is we have all of the politicians, the whole Democratic lead in New York City, the incoming administration for New York City is not pro-police, is not giving legitimacy to policing. It's giving legitimacy to the protesters. It's giving legitimacy to the civil unrest against the federal government and what they are trying to do under their mandates from this administration.
Ron, I know we're gonna wrap it up. I'll just say one last thing, because to this day, I still can't wrap my head around this, and it boggles my mind. But we all understand that this is what the voters of New York City asked for, and I don't understand it. I don't want to go down a political wormhole or disparage it. This is what the people, the majority of the people and the voters, this is what nobody was hiding behind anything. They were out in the open about what their platform was and what they wanted. And this is what the people in the city of New York overwhelmingly voted for. So now we have to deal with it. It's unfortunate.
And I think that the rest of the things that were in that excerpt, we've discussed extensively throughout today. Rob, anything else on this? Because we'll do a quick ask the executive, and then we gotta get going. You did a Marlin on me. You're muted.
You're muted, Rob.
You had to do a Marlin on me once for the show. That was for you, Marlin, our fire detective.
In memory of Marlon, he's always in our hearts, man.
He's in chat today.
I know. Hey, listen, what did I saw? Nate 477 1923 hours had a quick question, and it's relative to the Category 1 cars. So
All right. Well,
all of us had one of those.
all right. So you got nothing else on the topic? We're gonna go right into it.
Yeah, go right in. We only got like 5 minutes, so yeah, let's do it. Right.
All right.
So
So
it's-
yeah. So Nate says, ask exactly, what do you guys think of the new crop of lieutenants creating their own Category 1 vehicles? I guess that's out in the paper about the lieutenant. It was in Community Affairs. He had a Category 2 car. Category 2, for those of you who don't know, that's a car that you can park at a police precinct, and then pick it up and use it back and forth. You're basically using that in case you have to respond to an incident, so it's close. The car is closer to home, but the reality is you're saving the wear and tear and the tolls and gas on your car because you have a Category 2. Category 1 cars are a take-home car. You park it at your house, and you're allowed to come and go from work, because the need and the necessity for that is that you may have to respond to an emergency incident at any given time. That's the legitimacy of it. Creating your own, no good, no bueno, never was, never will be. And if they're going to take the car home without, here's the problem. I think too, it was discussed on the Sal Greco show. It was discussed also with Eric and John and Marlon, where a lot of these cars, guys are given the wink and the nod by their boss, and then when they get caught, the boss doesn't man up and say, "No, I gave him that authorization to use that car. It's on me." And then the boss either takes the hit or gets yelled at, and that's the end of it. But they got to stand up and say, "Listen, I said it was okay for Rob to take that car and park it at the 122 precinct." And that's not what happened in that situation.
And my quick advice with that is to reiterate your point, Ron. If a boss tells you to do something and you don't get it, and it's not really in the procedure, and it's something that's on the QT, you're gonna take the hit, because I haven't seen any boss that really steps up and says, "Oh, I was the guy that told you to do that." So if you don't get it in writing, don't do it, because it sounds good. It's all good. Unless you really trust this boss, I think they're going to all bail on you. And that's what I think what we see what's happening right now. When the boss said, "Oh yeah, you could take the call, Lieutenant." Okay, thank you. And then I never said that. So you just be careful and be cognizant of that, because I've seen it where, even as a 1-star chief, I've seen it where, other chiefs above me would say, "Yeah, go ahead, do it." And I'd be like, let's see if we can get this, legitimately in writing, because I don't think you're going to back me if the shit hit a fan. None of them really do. So that's my personal take. Tony, you had a Category 1. What do you think?
I will tell you very quickly, when I finally got my Category 1 vehicle, the minute that I was told I was getting a Category 1 vehicle, my first phone call was to the New York City Conflict of Interest Board. And I wanted in writing what I can and cannot do with a Category 1 vehicle. I printed it out and put it in my file cabinet, and I abided by it, because there are certain things that you can do and can't do. And I know, listen, since the inception of us having vehicles to take home, there's always been abuses. There always will be. It's a matter of whether you get caught or not, or whether you abide by the rules, and it's not going to change. But you just gotta don't abuse the privilege that you got. It's a good perk. It's a good perk to have, and there's a reason for it. So just go by it.
Yeah, and actually, after a couple of guys got caught abusing it, Kelly actually put out a memo delineating the do's and don'ts. So, all right, 92 Charlie, another supporter of the podcast. We appreciate the always active in the chat. What do you guys think about Mamdani appointing a convicted armed robber to his transition team? Hey, that's not the only pick. He's also put in supporters of cop killers into his transition team. I just think that bird's eye view of where this administration is going, where you thought it was going to go, it seems like to me, it's actually getting worse. It's actually looking worse. I was hopefully optimistic, if that's the right, if that's the right expression. And my optimism is decreasing by looking at his selections for his criminal justice reform and whatnot. Yeah.
Listen, what are we transitioning to? That's my question. If he's putting these people in there, what is the transition to? And it's not going in the right direction. Last week, Hard X Corps had a question at the end, and he asked about Rodney Harrison being on that transition team. And he asked, how do we think that Rodney Harrison got on the transition? I think he went there and basically begged for it. You know, he gave up everything he could to get on that transition team, because I think he's looking for a position either as the deputy commissioner or the deputy mayor of public safety, or as the next police commissioner or whatever. So I think he sold himself to get in that position, and that's how he got on the transition team. And then he's going to hope there's something else. And I like Rodney Harrison, but I don't think he's going to be fare well in that position, especially with this mayor. So the transition, in my opinion, is going in the wrong direction.
And Jose Vega is also put in there. He's got members that believe the police shouldn't even exist, and published papers and have blogs about complete anti-police rhetoric, and they are on the public safety portion of his transition team.
So listen, let me just jump in quick, because I know Rodney very well. Is a good friend of mine, and although I don't speak to him every single day, I speak to him occasionally, and I push back just a little bit on it. I from what I know, he wasn't begging. It's my understanding he wasn't begging for anything. It was more the other way around, where they were asking him to take part in it. And I know that back when the campaigns were going on, Rodney opened himself up to every candidate and said, you know, I'm here to answer any questions and help you. I truly, from what I know of Rodney and my experiences with him, his heart's in the right place, and he doesn't. He's not the type to have the ego where he would sell himself out, despite what some people may think. He's never been that way with me, and I don't see him in that regard where he's a sellout and will do anything and whatever just to get a position. I think I know that he's a family man, and I don't think that he could care less whether he gets a position or not, because I think he really is enjoying his retirement and wants to spend time with his family. So if something comes along, it comes along, and he'll have to make a choice. But I don't necessarily see him as going out there begging for anything.
I got to push back a little bit, because Rodney Harrison said he supported Mamdani. I think if he would stayed neutral in the beginning and didn't say anything, if he didn't say, "Oh, I support Mamdani," and all that he's, you know, basically what he was standing for, I think then that I would have had more respect for him. But as soon as what looked to me like kissing his ass, then I felt that he overstepped his bounds and he was looking for a position. But like I said, I worked with Rodney. I like Rodney. I just don't think, personally, I don't think anybody should want a position in this administration, because you're setting yourself up for failure. You know, whatever this guy wants, whatever he's going to do, he's going to crush you. And you're not, just like Adams went through 4 or 5 police commissioners because he felt he was the police commissioner. This guy is going to do the same and be even worse. So
yeah. Listen, I've always had positive interactions with Rodney on the job. And I don't have, I'm not aware of what you're talking about. I'm not going to comment on that portion. I didn't read anything on that. But what I do agree with is, you know, I don't know, looking at Mamdani, I don't know how you think you can come in and, with all the best intentions in the world, think that you're going to have the ability to put any kind of realistic view and realistic influence on this administration on what proper policing is supposed to be, because they're so anti-police. I'll you know, and it's, again, that's nothing against Rodney or anybody else. Issa Abbasi, I know Issa Abbasi. I like Issa Abbasi. I don't know what Issa Abbasi can do if he comes in. I don't think Issa Abbasi could do what he would want to do if he comes in.
I'm interested to see what Jessica Tisch is going to be able to do.
Yeah.
I mean,
Nothing.
A lot remains to be seen. And Rob, not that I'm going against you in any way, but I think to Rodney's, the whole thing about Rodney, I think we would have to fact check it, but I don't think that he necessarily wholeheartedly or in a broad stroke endorsed Mamdani. I think he agreed with some of the specific policies, but I don't think he ever gave a full endorsement of him as being the mayor. I don't know that happened. All that to say, it still remains to be seen what's going to happen and who's going to be able to get anything done. We
No matter who you are.
just don't know. We just
No matter,
don't know.
no matter who you are. I agree. So I don't know, I don't know. So I don't see any more questions in here. Rob, did you have anything marked down?
No, I like that Marlon says I must have joined the fire department because he's on fire today. That's funny.
You're on fire. Yeah. No. All right, listen, guys, we got to run. I got to get out of here. I'm sorry. Tony, I want to thank you immensely for coming on, giving great insight onto this topic. And I think that you elevate our show by coming on. I really appreciate, the fact that, we can have a great time off the air and even on the air when we were doing your interview. But when it comes down to it, the seriousness and the professionalism that you bring forward really fits in with what we want here on the executive perspective, and appreciate your input.
Hey, listen, I appreciate you guys having me on, and just 5 quick seconds to close out. I just want to say, to the men and women that are working right now in SRG, it's an uncertain time for you. And I get that. Just keep your head on a swivel and just keep doing your job and hope for the best. And I know what the morale is like right now in uncertain times, but just keep doing your job. We're out there rooting for you.
All right. And Rob, before I do the super chats and the shows.
Yeah, 100%. Like I definitely support SRG. I know the hard work that they do. And like Tony said, keep your head up high. Please, believe me, we're doing, obviously, if you listen to the podcast, we're doing everything we can to try to keep you guys there. We don't want to see you being disbanded. And, thanks for everybody in the chat, great conversations. Appreciate everybody, please, like and share, and, tell your friends about our podcast. I'd like to get more, more followers, more listeners. And we have an email. Ron usually puts it up on there. If there's topics and things that you think we should talk about, please, throw your suggestions up there. We'll be more than happy. If it fits within our purview, we'll be more than happy to talk about it. But and while you're out there, be safe. Keep your head on a swivel and just be careful.
Yeah,
Ron?
Really appreciate it. I'm sorry, I got to rush off. I got to get out of here. But again, thank you to Tony. Thanks to Rob. I think it was a great show today. Appreciate all the interaction, and listen, and the opposition. We don't mind an opposing opinion on this show at all. Our own opinions oppose each other sometimes, and that's fine. And we've had very diverse yet very similar careers, and so it doesn't mean that we think that one thing is going to cure everything. But on this, I think Tony is the subject matter expert. That's why I really appreciate you reaching out to us, following up on the past couple of weeks. So thanks again. And again, big supporter of the SRG, big supporter of everybody out there. We're not anti-police in any way, shape, or form. We're trying to help you to navigate through this the best that you can. So we want to really say thank you to Mana Tsunami, a great supporter of the entire network and of the executive perspective. Congrats, Gent, on 60K, 70K right around the corner. What he's talking about is the subscribers for the Finest Unfiltered Network. We passed over 60,000. We might even be at 61,000 at this point, subscribers. So we really appreciate that. Hey, right now we have 1,353 viewers on all different platforms watching this show. That's a really good number. And but a lot of it is on X, so what we suggest to get more involved with the chat, and interactive chat, and be able to see the chat, swing over and join us on YouTube on the Finest Unfiltered and get involved in the chat with us. We really appreciate it. I know a lot of people on X are listening because we're on during drive time, people on their way home from work. So we really appreciate all of our listeners, all of our followers, but 1,353 people right now on all the different platforms. That's we really appreciate that. Chaos politicians bring on chaos policies, which unfortunately lead to the surveillance state and erosion of our rights as citizens. Getting rid of SRG would further contribute to this chaos. Agree 100%. $60 to the podcast. Really appreciate that. Second one, Uncle Luke's. I see it like this. In this country, we have laws. You can't come here illegal or overstay your visa and not expect to get deported. For example, you can't go to other countries and cross their borders illegally, right? Okay. So
That's 100% right there.
20%, $20 to the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
As Rob said, any future questions for Ask the Executive, you can reach us at theexecutiveperspective@gmail.com, or you can DM us on X and give us a follow over on X @execperspective. And your identity will absolutely be kept confidential. That's not a question. If you want us to mention your name, we'll mention your name on the show. So if you have any questions while you're offline, or something that you feel you can't ask us online because you're an active member of the service, or you're a retired member and you just don't want to give up your identity, that's fine. We have no problem with that. Hit us up. If it's something that we don't think that we could bring up on the show, we'll get back to you anyway. We're not going to ignore you. So we really appreciate that, and reach out to us.
Thanks, Tony, too, by the way. Tony, thank you.
Anytime, guys.
Reach out. All right, so tomorrow on the Sal Greco show, 1:05 p.m., the reporter Kelly Grace Price is going to be back on the show tomorrow. It's the second time she's on. She's going to be talking about the 31 cops of the psychological assessment debacle, where they were overturned by Terrell Anderson, the CEO of the unit, and then the job was trying to fire them, and so now they're going to talk about that. The Kaz Daughtry leaving the NYPD, and also Marlon teased that she's going to have some breaking news on another agency. So make sure you tune in tomorrow. Tuesdays and Thursdays, Sal Greco at 13:05. Friday morning, 08:05, the Finest Unfiltered with with John, Eric, and Marlon. They'll have their roundtable on Friday. Then they'll be back on Monday. On Tuesday, again, Sal Greco at 1:05, and then at 19:05, 7:05, you have the 10 Fort Tavern. It's a great podcast. It brings executives and people from around the country, from all different agencies on their podcast. Great perspectives. Last night they went a little off their normal, and then they had Anthony Imparato on their show, a great humanitarian, a great patriot. Please go back, watch that show on the rewind, on the recorded episode on the Finest Unfiltered Network. Another really good show. He's the CEO and founder of Henry Repeating Arms, All-American Made Rifles. He also, again, is a quiet supporter, does things not to broadcast what he's supporting. He also supported Eric Dim and his family during Derek's fight for his life, sent him holy water, and just an incredible human being. Go back, give that show a watch. Next Tuesday, they're going to have retired Lieutenant Tom Monahan from the Las Vegas Police Department. Great show. They always usually have somebody on that had some type of notorious case that they were involved in. He was involved in the Tupac Shakur homicide, so that should be an interesting show. We'll watch them again on Tuesday, and then we'll be back next Wednesday at 17:05, 5:05 p.m. Eastern Time for the next episode of The Executive Perspective. Really appreciate everybody for being on here. And so until next week, everybody really appreciate it. Be safe.